Parents didn't even notice I moved out. Now dad's threatening to cut college funds, but I graduated 3 years ago. So, I'm the youngest of five, and when I say youngest, I don't mean just by a little bit. There's like a 7 year gap between me and my next sibling. And to be honest, it always felt like I was invisible growing up. My siblings all had their own stuff going on, and I guess my parents just assumed that because I wasn't sick or having mental health issues like the rest of them, I didn't need them. I'm not trying to be all woe is me or whatever, but it's the truth. The others were always in and out of hospitals, therapy, you name it. And me? I was just there. The glass child, they call it, right? You can see me, but you don't really notice me. I was fine with that for the most part. I spent a lot of time by myself, playing video games, reading, keeping to myself. I had to learn to entertain myself because, well, no one else was really around to do it. It's not like I was expected to take care of my siblings, though. I've seen other people talk about how they had to sacrifice their childhoods to take care of brothers or sisters, but that wasn't me. My parents handled all that, so credit where credit's due. But because I wasn't causing problems, because I wasn't in crisis mode like my siblings, I just kind of fell through the cracks. I didn't need help, so I didn't get any. I don't think my parents did it on purpose or anything. It's just that when you've got 4 kids who are constantly dealing with health stuff, the one who's healthy is kind of like an afterthought. They were always so busy with hospital visits, doctor's appointments, and school meetings for the others that I just became this kid who didn't cause trouble and didn't get attention. It's like I was invisible, but not in the tragic movie kind of way, just in a practical, we've got our hands full kind of way. Anyway, I wasn't completely alone. When I was about 9, I made 2 friends, Mia and Clara, who were basically in the same boat. Their families weren't great either, and we kind of found each other in this unspoken way. We just clicked, you know? We understood what it was like to be ignored, to be left out, and that bonded us. Over time, they became more like my real family than my actual family ever did. We were inseparable all through school, and we stuck together even after high school ended. We went to college together, graduated together, and eventually moved to a new state together. It was like we built our own little family out of the scraps of what our real families couldn't give us. As for my parents, we didn't talk much once I left home. I guess that was to be expected, since we never really talked when I was still living there either. My mom would text me now and then, mostly small talk stuff like, "How's school?" or "What are you doing for work?" That kind of thing. Our relationship was super surface level, but honestly, that was an improvement from my teenage years. Back in high school, we barely spoke at all. So yeah, I didn't expect much from them, and I didn't ask for much either. I think what really made it clear how disconnected I was from them was this one phone call from my mom last year. It was a few days before Thanksgiving, and she called me out of nowhere. Now, we never call each other, so right off the bat, I knew something was up. The last time I had spoken to her on the phone was like maybe a year before that, when she told me about the time and place of one of my sister's funerals. That's how little we talked. So anyway, she calls me and asks what time I'm coming for Thanksgiving. And I'm sitting there like, wait, what? Because I had no idea they were even planning anything for Thanksgiving. It wasn't like we had some big family tradition or whatever. In fact, in my whole life, I can remember maybe 3 times that they even tried to do Thanksgiving or Christmas. It just wasn't a thing in my family. I told her that I already had plans. I mean, I was going on a ski trip with Mia and Clara. So it wasn't like I could just drop everything and come over, even if I wanted to. Plus, I live 2 states away, and I would have needed to book a plane ticket months ago if I was going to come. But she acted like I was just being difficult. And then she starts guilt-tripping me, saying she was going to be all alone because my dad was going to spend the day visiting my brother in the facility he's in. He's like a 2-hour drive from them, so apparently my dad was going to be gone most of the day. I get it, I really do. But she gave me 3 days notice. 3 days. And I was supposed to just magically show up and make her feel better? I told her I couldn't come, and she got mad, saying I didn't care about the family or some crap like that. I repeated that I already had plans, and she hung up on me. After the call, I sat there for a bit, feeling guilty but also kind of pissed. Like, I hadn't heard from them in forever, and now all of a sudden I'm the bad guy for not coming home for Thanksgiving. I scrolled through our old texts just to make sure I hadn't missed anything, but nope. Nothing about Thanksgiving, nothing about wanting to see me. She just sprung it on me last minute like I was supposed to drop everything and be there. I ended up sending her a text later that night, saying that I had a ski trip booked for Christmas and wouldn't be able to come for that either, but I'd love to catch up with her and Dad after the new year, trying to be nice about it. She didn't reply. A few days after that whole Thanksgiving mess, I was still trying to shake off the weird feeling. You know when something just nags at you and you can't quite figure out why? That's how I felt about the way my mom had tried to make me feel bad for not coming home. Like, she calls me out of nowhere, guilt trips me for not being there, but at the same time, she never actually told me they were doing Thanksgiving. It's like they expected me to be a mind reader or something. But anyway, I had pretty much moved on by then. I was getting ready for my ski trip with Mia and Clara. We'd been planning it for months, and I was super excited. The three of us hadn't had a proper vacation in forever, so we were looking forward to just hanging out and relaxing. Then, out of nowhere, I get this text from my dad. Now, my dad almost never texts me, so I figured it was going to be important. But instead of something reasonable, he hits me with, "If you don't come home for Christmas, I'm stopping your college payments." At first, I actually laughed. Like, what? I graduated 3 years ago. What payments? It was so out of left field I had to read it twice to make sure I wasn't missing something. I thought maybe he was confused or he was talking about someone else, so I sent him a text back, reminding him that I had already graduated. And if he thought he was still paying for my college, then he needed to check his bank account because someone was scamming him. I thought that would be the end of it. Honestly, I figured he'd feel stupid once he realized I wasn't in school anymore. But no. A few hours later, I get another text from him, this time saying that I was being selfish and ungrateful. He threw in a bunch of stuff about how they'd sacrificed so much for me and my siblings, and how I didn't appreciate any of it. Okay, first of all, I never asked for anything from them. Second, I didn't even know they were paying for my college because my grandma was the one who covered it. She told me straight up that she didn't want my parents messing with my education, so she took care of everything herself. So, yeah, I had no idea what my dad was even talking about. At this point, I'm kind of mad. Like, I get it if they're stressed out with my siblings and all, but guilt-tripping me about stuff they didn't even do? That's a whole new level. So, I texted back, being as polite as I could manage, and said something like, "I'm sorry you feel that way, but Grandma paid for my college. I'm happy to catch up after the holidays, but I already have plans." I thought that would shut it down, but nope. My dad decides to go full drama mode and starts texting me about how I've abandoned the family, how I'm turning my back on them, and that he's done helping me out if I won't make an effort. By this point, I'm just staring at my phone like, what is happening? Abandon the family? I've been living on my own for years and they barely even noticed. And now, all of a sudden, because I won't drop my life and rush back for Christmas, I'm the bad guy? I wanted to just ignore it, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. The more I thought, the more pissed off I got. It's like they hadn't spoken to me in months, hadn't bothered to check in or ask how I was doing, but the second they needed something, it was my responsibility to make everything better. I was supposed to be their backup plan or something. So I called Mia and Clara to vent. They both said the same thing, that it sounded like my parents were just using me as a guilt trip. Mia said that they probably wanted me back home for Christmas so they wouldn't feel bad about themselves, not because they actually wanted to see me. Clara, as usual, didn't hold back and said straight up, "Screw them, you don't owe them anything." I decided to sleep on it and cool off before responding again. But as I'm lying there, my phone buzzes again. It's my dad, but this time the text is short and cold. He says, "If you don't come home, don't bother coming back at all." I read that and honestly, I just felt numb. Like, how did we get here? How did we go from not talking for months to basically disowning me because I wasn't coming for Christmas? It didn't even feel real. I stared at the message for a long time, and part of me wanted to fire back and say something nasty. I wanted to call him out on all the times they ignored me, on all the times I felt like I didn't even exist in that house. But instead, I just didn't respond. I put my phone down, rolled over, and tried to sleep. I didn't want to get dragged into some big family drama right before the holidays. I didn't want to deal with the guilt trips, the accusations, or whatever other crap they were going to throw at me. So, I just left it. The next day, I woke up to more texts, this time from my mom. She didn't say much, just that they were disappointed in me, that they didn't understand why I was being so distant, and that they hoped I'd change my mind. I couldn't help but laugh a little because distant didn't even begin to cover it. I'd been distant my whole life, but they were just now noticing? I ignored the texts again and focused on getting ready for the ski trip. Mia and Clara were pumped, and honestly, I was too. It felt like the perfect escape from all the family nonsense. We hit the road the next day, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't think about my parents. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I just felt free. But of course, things couldn't stay peaceful forever. Just when I thought I could move past it, I got another message from my mom, this time right in the middle of the trip. She wasn't giving up. She said that if I didn't come home soon, they'd have to start making decisions about the future without me, decisions that I wouldn't like. That's when it clicked. They were planning something. Something bigger than just Christmas. Maybe they were talking about one of my brothers or something with the house. I didn't know what, but suddenly it made sense why they were pushing so hard. They didn't want me around just for the holidays. They wanted me back in the fold for some bigger reason. And honestly, that realization was like a punch in the gut. All this time, I thought they were just being clingy or feeling lonely. But it was never about me. Not really. It was about what they could get from me. I was done. So, after that whole mess with my parents trying to guilt trip me, I thought things would just die down. I ignored their texts, went on the ski trip, and tried to focus on the fact that I had my own life, my own plans, and I wasn't going to let them drag me back into their world of guilt and expectations. But of course, it wasn't that simple. I was back home, just getting settled into my usual routine, when I got a message from my older brother, Jake. Now I hadn't talked to Jake in months, probably longer, actually. Jake was the one sibling who, when we were growing up, I thought would maybe understand me a little. He wasn't as sick as my other brothers, so I always figured we could have had something more, but he was always too wrapped up in his own life. Whatever. Anyway, seeing his name pop up on my phone surprised me. His message was simple. Hey, we need to talk. I didn't know what he wanted, but I wasn't in the mood for more family drama. I texted back, about what? A few minutes later, he calls me. I debated whether to answer, but curiosity got the better of me. So I pick up the phone, and before I can even say hello, he jumps straight into it. Mom and Dad have been talking about making you the legal guardian for one of the boys when they're gone. I swear, I almost dropped the phone. My heart was racing, and I just sat there stunned for a few seconds. Was this some kind of joke? Like, after all these years of barely being in my life, now they're just going to dump this responsibility on me? What the hell are you talking about? I finally managed to ask. Jake sighs like I'm the one being unreasonable. You know how things are with Mom and Dad. They've got a lot on their plate with the other boys, and they're not going to be around forever. They need to know someone's going to step up and take care of things when they're gone. I could feel my blood boiling. And they think that someone is me? After everything? After all the ignoring and guilt tripping, they just assume I'm going to drop everything and take over their mess? Jake didn't seem to get why I was so upset. Look, I know it's a lot, but you're the only one who's really stable. The rest of us, we've got our own issues. I almost laughed. Yeah, well, maybe you guys should have thought about that before now. I didn't even know this was a thing. They never told me. They were going to talk to you about it, he said, but I figured you should know before they tried to spring it on you. I was pissed. This wasn't just about Christmas or Thanksgiving anymore. This was bigger. They were planning something long-term, and they hadn't even thought to talk to me until now, when it was convenient for them. They hadn't spoken to me in years, and now they wanted me to step in as the responsible one? No, just no. So what, they've been discussing this behind my back? I asked, still trying to wrap my head around it. Like, they just decided I'd take on the responsibility without even asking me? Yeah, pretty much, Jake admitted. They've been planning for a while. I sat there in silence for a minute, just staring at the wall, trying to process everything. Part of me wanted to scream at Jake, but I knew it wasn't really his fault. He was just the messenger. But that didn't change the fact that my parents were about to screw me over in the biggest way possible. They weren't just asking for a favor. They were asking me to dedicate the rest of my life to cleaning up after them. I was done being invisible, but I sure as hell wasn't going to become their backup plan now. So what am I supposed to do? I asked, feeling more defeated than anything. Just drop my whole life and move back home? Give up everything I've worked for? Jake didn't have an answer for that. He tried to talk about how hard things were for our parents, how they were struggling to manage everything with my brother's care, but I didn't care. I'd spent my whole life being pushed aside because I wasn't a problem. Now, they wanted to use me because I was the only one who had my life together? It wasn't fair. I'm not doing it, I said, cutting him off mid-sentence. I'm not going to be their backup. They didn't give a crap about me for the last 25 years, and they sure as hell don't get to make me responsible for everyone now. Jake was silent for a second, then said, I get it, I do. But you're still part of the family. Family? That word made me want to scream. Sure, I was part of the family, but only when it was convenient for them. Only when they needed something. When I was a kid, they didn't care if I was okay or if I needed help. But now that they were scared of what the future held, suddenly I was the one they needed. Tell them I'm not interested, I said, and don't bother calling me about this again. I hung up before Jake could respond, and for a while, I just sat there, staring at the phone, trying to calm down. I felt like my whole life had been leading up to this moment where I'd finally had enough. Enough of the guilt trips. Enough of the manipulative texts. Enough of being ignored and then used. I wasn't going to be their safety net. A few days passed without any contact from Jake or my parents. It was almost like they were waiting for me to come to my senses, to change my mind and be the good daughter they'd suddenly decided I should be. But I wasn't about to budge. I wasn't going to let them dump their problems on me just because I was the only one left standing. Then, a letter came in the mail. It was from my mom. She hadn't even called. She just sent a letter like we were living in the 1800s or something. The letter was long and rambling, filled with the same guilt-tripping crap I'd heard before. She went on about how much they needed me, how hard things were for them, and how they didn't know what they were going to do if I didn't help. But what really pissed me off was the last part. My mom wrote, "We're not asking for much, Olivia. We just need to know that when we're gone, someone will step up for the family." That's when I realized what this was really about. They didn't care about me. They just cared about making sure their mess was cleaned up after they were gone. They didn't want me back in their lives because they missed me or loved me. They wanted me because I was convenient, because I was the only one who hadn't fallen apart. I crumpled up the letter and threw it in the trash. I was done. Update 1. After that letter from my mom, I thought I had reached my limit. I mean, what else could they throw at me that I hadn't already seen? I was already done with their guilt trips, their manipulations. They're trying to make me responsible for their mess. But of course, I was wrong. It wasn't over. Not even close. A week or two after I trashed the letter, I got another call. This time from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't pick up, but something in me was curious. Maybe it was Jake again, or maybe it was one of my parents trying a different number since I'd been ignoring theirs. Either way, I picked up. "Hey, Olivia, it's Sarah." Now, Sarah is one of my sisters. We were never really close. I mean, she was always dealing with her own stuff, hospitals, therapists, all of it. I felt bad for her growing up, sure, but I didn't really know her. We were basically strangers living under the same roof. So, hearing from her now, after everything, felt weird. Hey, I said, not sure where this was going. "Look," she started, "I know things have been kind of rough between you and Mom and Dad, but I really need you to listen to what I'm going to say." I could already feel my stomach sinking. Here it comes, I thought. More guilt. More trying to drag me back in. "What is it?" I asked, trying to sound neutral, but already bracing myself for whatever crap was coming. She took a deep breath, and then she said, "They're not doing well. Like, really not doing well. Dad's health is going downhill fast, and they're freaking out because no one's stepping up to help with the boys. They're scared, Olivia. They don't know what to do." I didn't say anything for a second. It wasn't that I didn't care. I did. I didn't want to see anyone suffer, not even my parents. But after everything, after years of them not giving a crap about me, I couldn't just rush in and fix things for them. I wasn't their Band-Aid. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said carefully. "But I can't just drop everything. I have a life too, Sarah." She sighed, and I could tell she was frustrated. "I get that, but you're the only one who's in a position to help. Jake's barely holding it together, and you know what's going on with me and the others. There's no one else, Olivia. They're desperate." "Desperate because they ignored this for years," I shot back, feeling the anger bubble up again. "They let this all build up, thinking it would just go away. And now, because I'm the one who managed to get out and make something of my life, it's my responsibility? That's not fair, Sarah." "I know it's not fair," she said quietly, "but this is where we are. They need help." And there it was again. The same old story. The same old guilt. No matter what I did, no matter how far I tried to move away from it, they always found a way to drag me back. I could feel the pressure building inside me, the frustration and resentment that had been simmering for years now coming to a boil. "I'm not doing it," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "I'm not going to be the one to clean up their mess. They didn't care about me when I was a kid, and they sure as hell don't get to come to me now just because it's convenient. I've got my own life. They need to figure this out themselves." I could hear the hurt in Sarah's voice when she spoke again. "I get it, Olivia, I really do. But this isn't about you or me. It's about the family. It's about what's going to happen to the boys when they're gone. If we don't step up, who will?" That hit me hard. Not because I suddenly felt responsible, but because it made me realize just how trapped we all were. My parents had spent years neglecting me, pushing me to the side, and now they were trying to use me as their escape plan. And my siblings? They were stuck in the middle of it all, just as trapped as I was, only they didn't have the strength to fight back. "I'm sorry," I said again, softer this time, "but I can't. I won't." There was a long pause, and I could feel the weight of her disappointment through the phone. But I wasn't going to cave. Not this time. I couldn't. Okay, she said finally, her voice flat. I'll tell them. She hung up before I could say anything else, and I just sat there for a while staring at my phone, feeling a mix of relief and guilt. I didn't owe my parents anything, I knew that, but still it hurt. It hurt to know that my family was falling apart, and I was powerless to stop it. Or maybe I wasn't powerless, I just wasn't willing to sacrifice myself for them anymore. A few days later, I got another letter from my mom. This time, it was even worse. She didn't even bother with pleasantries. She went straight for the guilt trip. She wrote about how disappointed she was in me, how I was letting the family down, how she couldn't believe I would turn my back on them in their time of need. She threw in a bunch of stuff about how hard it was for her and my dad, how they'd sacrificed so much for us, and how she didn't know what she'd done to deserve a daughter who was so selfish. It was brutal, and for a second it worked. I felt that old, familiar sting of guilt, the same guilt I'd felt my whole life growing up. But then I remembered all the years I'd spent being invisible, all the times they'd forgotten about me, all the moments I needed them and they weren't there. And I realized that this wasn't about them needing help. This was about control. This was about them trying to pull me back into their web, to make me feel like I owed them something. But I didn't owe them anything. Not anymore. I crumpled up the letter and tossed it in the trash, just like the last one. I was done. I was done being their pawn. I was done letting them manipulate me. I had my own life now, and I wasn't going to let them take that away from me. The next day, I blocked their numbers. I blocked Jake's too, just to be safe. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the only one that felt right. I couldn't keep letting them drag me down, keep making me feel like I was responsible for their problems. They made their choices, and now they had to live with them. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Update 2. Blocking their numbers felt like a relief, like this heavy weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in, well, ever, I had control over the situation. I wasn't sitting there waiting for another guilt-tripping message from my mom or a surprise call from Jake. It was quiet, peaceful, but of course that didn't last. About 2 weeks after I blocked them, I got a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and honestly I thought it might be a delivery or something. But when I opened the door, there she was, my mom, standing right there on my doorstep like she had every right to be there. I don't know how she found me. I mean, I hadn't exactly been hiding, but I didn't think she'd just show up at my place. She looked different. Older, I guess. Or maybe it was just the stress, but either way, I could see that things hadn't been easy for her. But I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my voice as calm as I could. She didn't answer right away. She just stood there looking at me like she didn't recognize me. Finally, she spoke. "We need to talk, Olivia." I sighed. "No, we really don't. I've said everything I needed to say. I've made my decision." She stepped forward like she was going to come in, but I stood in the doorway, blocking her. I wasn't about to let her in and let this turn into another guilt trip. "Please, just listen," she said, her voice softer now. "Your father's getting worse. He's in and out of the hospital, and we don't know how much time he has left. I don't know what to do, Olivia." There it was. The card she'd been waiting to play. The "your father is dying" card. She didn't say it outright, but I knew that's what she was hinting at. And I'm not heartless. I didn't want my dad to suffer. But after everything they'd put me through, I couldn't just drop everything and rush to their side. "I'm sorry," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But this isn't my problem. You and Dad have had years to figure this out. You can't just show up now and expect me to fix everything." She looked at me like I'd slapped her. "I'm not asking you to fix anything. I just need you to be there. For the family." "For the family?" I repeated, almost laughing. "What family? The one that ignored me for 25 years? The one that only talks to me when they need something? That's not a family, Mom. That's just manipulation." Her eyes widened, and for a second, I thought maybe she was going to argue with me. But instead, she just started crying. Right there, on my doorstep, she broke down in tears. And I didn't know what to do. I wasn't going to invite her in, but I couldn't just stand there and watch her cry either. "Look," I said, my voice softer now. "I get that this is hard for you. I really do. But I'm not your backup plan. I'm not the person who's going to come in and make everything okay. You made your choices. Now you have to deal with them." She wiped her eyes and looked up at me, and I could see the anger starting to replace the sadness. "We did the best we could, Olivia. You don't understand what it was like, raising all of you, dealing with everything. We didn't have time for you because we were trying to keep everyone else alive. There it was. The excuse. The same excuse I'd heard a million times before. And that's not my fault, I said, my voice firm now. You made the choice to have 5 kids. You made the choice to focus on everyone else and leave me behind. That was your decision, not mine. And now you're trying to make me feel guilty for it. I won't do it, Mom. I won't. She stood there for a long time, not saying anything, just staring at me like she didn't know who I was anymore. And maybe she didn't. Maybe in her mind I was still that little kid she could ignore because I wasn't causing trouble. But I wasn't that kid anymore. I was done being invisible. Finally, she spoke. So, that's it. You're just going to turn your back on us? I shook my head. No, you turned your back on me a long time ago. I'm just finally walking away. She didn't have anything to say to that. She just turned and walked away, heading back to her car. I watched her go, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Part of me was sad, sure, but most of me just felt free. Like I'd finally let go of something I'd been carrying for years. Something I should have let go of a long time ago. After she left, I went back inside and sat down, trying to process everything that had just happened. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was just done. Done with the guilt, the manipulation, the constant feeling like I wasn't enough. I wasn't going to be their backup plan. I wasn't going to be their last resort. I had my own life to live, and I wasn't going to let them drag me down anymore. The next few weeks were quiet. I didn't hear from anyone. No calls, no letters, nothing. And honestly, it was the best I'd felt in a long time. I focused on work, on my friends, on my life. I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next message from them. I wasn't living in the shadow of their expectations anymore. And then, about a month later, I got an email. Not from my mom or my dad this time, but from Jake. It was short, just a few sentences, but it said everything I needed to know. Dad passed away last night. I thought you should know. I stared at the email for a long time, not really sure how to feel. I wasn't surprised. I knew this was coming. But I didn't feel sad either. I didn't feel much of anything, honestly. I thought about responding. I thought about calling Jake, asking how he was holding up, maybe even offering my condolences. But then I realized that this was just another step in the same cycle. Another chance for them to pull me back in, and I wasn't going to fall for it this time. I closed the email without replying and went on with my day. I wasn't part of their world anymore, and I was finally okay with that. My entitled parents told my golden child sister that she could take my adoptive daughter because I am not her real mother anyway. All right, let me just get straight into it. If you grew up in a family like mine, you'd probably understand that there's always that one sibling who can do no wrong. In my case, that sibling was my younger sister, Sarah. Honestly, it's like my parents had already made up their minds when she was born that she was going to be the golden child. Meanwhile, I was stuck being the responsible one, the one who had to pick up the pieces whenever she messed up. Sarah always got away with everything. I'm talking about sneaking out at night, blowing off school, hanging with people who were definitely bad news. And my parents? They had a million excuses for her. She's going through a phase, they'd say. She just needs to figure herself out. Meanwhile, if I so much as raised my voice, I'd get a lecture about respect and responsibility. It was exhausting. Things really started going downhill when Sarah was about 17. That's when she started getting really wild. She was going to these parties every weekend, sometimes with people way older than her. Honestly, I don't even think she knew half the people she was hanging out with. I'd see her sneaking back into the house at 3 a.m., barely able to stand, and my parents just turned a blind eye to it. She's young, they'd say. Let her enjoy her life. Well, that carefree life caught up to her. Not even a month after she turned 18, she got pregnant. And of course, it was by some random guy she met at one of those parties. She didn't even know his last name. It was one of those moments where I thought, okay, maybe now our parents will step in and make her face some responsibility. But nope, that's not how things went down. Sarah was freaking out when she found out she was pregnant. I mean, she wasn't ready for a kid. She could barely take care of herself, let alone a baby. The first thing she said was that she wanted to get rid of it. She was adamant. She didn't want to be a mom, and honestly, I can't blame her for that. But my parents? Well, they weren't having it. They're super religious and acted like having an abortion was the worst thing she could ever do. They pretty much forced her to keep the baby despite how much she protested. I remember overhearing Sarah once saying she'd just leave the baby on some random doorstep when it was born if that's what it took to get rid of it. It wasn't just teenage rebellion or anger. She really didn't want this kid, and she was willing to do whatever it took to avoid being tied down by a baby. Fast forward a few months, and Sarah gives birth to this tiny little baby girl, Emily. Now, most people think that when a mother sees her baby for the first time, something clicks and they instantly fall in love. Well, that didn't happen with Sarah. She barely looked at Emily. In fact, she left the hospital the day after giving birth and didn't even take Emily home with her. My parents brought the baby home while Sarah went off to, I don't know, find herself or something. And that's when everything changed for me. I couldn't just sit by and watch this little baby, my niece, be treated like an unwanted burden. I wasn't exactly jumping at the idea of becoming a parent, but someone had to step up, and it sure as hell wasn't going to be Sarah. So I made the decision to adopt Emily. I didn't even think twice about it. I wasn't going to let her grow up in a house where no one cared about her. Sarah didn't even put up a fight. She was more than happy to sign over her parental rights and walk away from it all. To her, it was like a huge weight had been lifted. Meanwhile, I was thrown into this whole new world of motherhood that I wasn't even remotely prepared for. When I told my boyfriend at the time, Ryan, about my decision, he wasn't exactly thrilled. In fact, he was downright pissed. We'd been together for 3 years, and he made it clear from the beginning that he didn't want kids. So when I told him I was adopting Emily, he gave me this ultimatum, him or the baby. Yeah, he really said that. And honestly, I didn't even have to think about it. I chose Emily. Ryan packed his stuff and walked out the door, and just like that, I was a single mom to a newborn baby. I'd be lying if I said it was easy. It wasn't, at all. I was 21, trying to finish my last year of college, working part-time just to pay the bills, and now I had a baby who needed me 24/7. There were days I thought I was going to lose it. Emily would cry all night, and I'd have to be up at 7 a.m. for class. I was so exhausted that there were times I didn't even know what day it was. And then there was the money issue. Babysitters? They're expensive. I couldn't afford daycare, so I relied on friends or classmates to watch Emily when I had to go to school or work. And even then, it felt like I was barely scraping by. My parents were still busy trying to fix Sarah's mess, so they weren't much help. They'd babysit every now and then, but they were more concerned with Sarah's emotional well-being than actually supporting me. But you know what? Despite all the sleepless nights, the stress, and the feeling that my life had been flipped upside down, I didn't regret it. Not for a second. Emily became my whole world. The first time she smiled at me, all the exhaustion and frustration melted away. It's hard to explain, but in those moments, it didn't matter how tired or broke I was. Emily needed me, and I was going to be there for her. As for Sarah, she didn't show any interest in Emily's life for years. She moved on, did her own thing, and barely even asked about her daughter. And honestly, that was fine by me. The less drama, the better. At that point, I thought things were finally settling down. I was figuring out how to balance school, work, and being a mom, and Emily was thriving. But of course, life has a way of throwing things at you when you least expect it. And it wasn't long before Sarah decided she wanted to waltz back into Emily's life, stirring up all kinds of trouble. But I'll get to that later. For now, all you need to know is that becoming Emily's mom changed everything for me. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew I wasn't going to let my niece grow up feeling unwanted, even if it meant sacrificing everything I thought my life would be like. All right, so after Ryan walked out and I adopted Emily, life got real. Fast. You know, people always talk about how hard it is to be a single mom, but until you're actually in it, there's just no way to understand how intense it really is. I thought I had a general idea of what I was signing up for, but I quickly found out I was completely wrong. Let's start with the basics. I was 21, still in college, and suddenly responsible for this tiny human who needed me for everything. It was like being thrown into the deep end of a pool without knowing how to swim. I barely had time to process the fact that I was now a single mom because every second was about keeping Emily fed, changed, and hopefully sleeping. And let me tell you, that kid did not like to sleep. Everyone told me, "Oh, newborns sleep a lot, you'll get some rest." Yeah, okay. Maybe other people's babies do, but Emily? Nope. She was the lightest sleeper in the world. The second I thought I could close my eyes for 5 minutes, she'd wake up crying. I swear, I got so used to functioning on 2 or 3 hours of sleep that it felt like a luxury. On top of that, there was school. I was in my last year of college, and dropping out wasn't an option. I had to finish, for both of us. But juggling full-time classes, homework, and taking care of Emily, that was a different beast. There were days I'd rush from a lecture to daycare to pick her up, then head to my part-time job, and by the time I got home, I was so exhausted I didn't even have the energy to cook. It felt like my whole life was just this constant cycle of feeding Emily, running to class, picking her up, working, and then doing it all over again. Honestly, it was like I was in survival mode. No time to think, just doing what I had to do to keep everything moving. The worst part wasn't even the lack of sleep or time. It was the isolation. My friends were off doing what normal 21-year-olds do, going out, planning for their careers, and talking about vacations or concerts. Meanwhile, I was up at 3 a.m. with a crying baby and a pile of laundry I hadn't touched in days. I tried to keep up with my friends at first, but the invites started to slow down. I mean, I don't blame them. It's hard to relate to someone whose life revolves around diapers and teething when yours is about internships and bar crawls. I think the moment that hit the hardest was one night when I got a group text from my college friends, all talking about this big trip they were planning for after graduation. A week in Cancun, sun, drinks, fun, everything I used to look forward to. And here I was, sitting in the bathroom with Emily in my arms, trying to get her to calm down after she woke up screaming. The reality of it all just kind of punched me in the face at that moment. That wasn't my life anymore, but as tough as it was, I was also starting to get the hang of it. There were small victories, like the first time I managed to get Emily to sleep through the night. Well, okay, maybe not the whole night, but 5 straight hours felt like a miracle. Or the first time I got an A on an assignment I'd crammed for while Emily napped in the stroller next to me. It wasn't all bad. The connection I had with Emily was something I never expected. Like, the first time she smiled at me, genuinely smiled, it was like the world stopped for a second. All the sleepless nights, the stress, the doubts, they didn't disappear, but they felt a little less heavy. In those moments, it was all worth it. There was one day that stands out. I had a huge exam, and I was stressed to the max. Emily was teething, so she was extra fussy. I had been up all night with her, trying everything I could to soothe her, and by morning, I felt like a zombie. I ended up taking her to daycare half an hour late, and by the time I got to my class, I was a wreck. I sat there staring at the exam paper, and all I could think about was how I was failing at everything. School, motherhood, life in general. I didn't even care about the exam at that point. After class, I picked up Emily and headed home, fully prepared for another night of chaos. But something changed. When we got home, she was calmer. She wasn't crying, she wasn't fussy. She just looked at me with those big eyes and reached out for me. I held her close, and in that moment, I realized that even though I felt like I was drowning, Emily didn't see me as a failure. To her, I was her world. I was doing something right, even if it didn't always feel that way. That realization was like a switch flipping. I started letting go of the idea that I had to be perfect. I was never going to have it all figured out, and that was okay. I just had to keep going, keep pushing for her. But as much as I was finding my rhythm with Emily, things with my family were still strained. My parents? They were more concerned with Sarah's healing process than helping me out. Every time I asked them for help, like, could you watch Emily for an hour so I can study? They'd come back with some excuse about how Sarah needed their attention or how they were too busy. The golden child syndrome was still alive and well. Sarah, who was living her carefree life without a single responsibility, somehow still managed to be the center of their world. It's like they'd forgotten about the fact that I was the one who stepped up for Emily when Sarah couldn't be bothered. It was infuriating, but at this point, I'd come to expect it. Rachel, my best friend, was the only one who really had my back during all of this. She'd drop by with groceries when she knew I didn't have time to shop, or come over just to keep me company while I studied, and Emily slept. I honestly don't know how I would have made it through without her. Alright, so things were finally starting to feel like they were under control. I mean, don't get me wrong, it wasn't easy by any means, but I had my routine with Emily, school was getting wrapped up, and I was finally getting the hang of this whole single mom life. But just when I thought I had it all under control, that's when Sarah decided she wanted back in. I hadn't heard from her in years. Not a single call, text, nothing. And then, out of nowhere, she shows up at my parents' house for dinner one night, acting like the last 5 years didn't even happen. It was like she was coming back from a long vacation, ready to slide right into the role she abandoned. My mom was so excited to have her back, but I had a feeling in my gut that this wasn't just a casual visit. Something was coming. So a few days later, Sarah calls me up, and I'm not even going to lie, I didn't want to answer. But I did, and the conversation was so weird. She was all like, I've been thinking a lot about Emily lately. I really want to get to know her. I didn't even know how to respond at first because the nerve of her to act like she hadn't disappeared for 5 years was blowing my mind. I asked her, why now? What's changed? She didn't have a good answer, of course. Just the typical, I've changed, I've grown up, nonsense. And while part of me wanted to believe her, I wasn't stupid. I didn't trust her. But at the same time, I didn't want to be the bad guy. I didn't want to be the person who kept Emily away from her biological mother, no matter how much I knew she didn't deserve to be called that. So I agreed to let Sarah come over, not for Emily's sake, but because I wanted to see how serious she was about changing. If she really wanted to be a part of Emily's life, she'd have to earn it. But honestly, I wasn't holding my breath. When she came over for the first time, it was awkward. I mean, how do you reintroduce a woman to her biological daughter when the daughter doesn't even know she exists? I had told Emily before that Sarah was her birth mother, but I'd kept things simple because, let's face it, she was too young to understand all the complexities of that situation. To her, Sarah was just some random woman she'd never met. The first visit went about as well as you'd expect. Sarah tried to be all friendly, talking to Emily like they were old friends, but Emily wasn't having it. She was shy and stuck by my side the whole time. I mean, can you blame her? Sarah was practically a stranger, and kids are smart. They can sense when something's off. But here's where things started to get weird. After the first visit, Sarah kept coming back, and at first I didn't mind. I thought maybe it would be good for Emily to at least know her biological mom, even if Sarah had bailed on us before. But Sarah wasn't just coming by for short visits. She was hanging around longer and longer each time. It was like she was trying to ease herself back into a role she had no right to. She started bringing Emily gifts, new toys, clothes, even expensive stuff like tablets and gadgets. I mean, I appreciate a gift as much as anyone, but it felt off, like she was trying to buy her way into Emily's life. Emily didn't even need that stuff. She was happy with her dolls and crayons. But Sarah just kept piling on the gifts, almost as if she was trying to impress someone. It wasn't about Emily at all. It was about her ego. Then, one day, Sarah drops the big question. Do you think Emily could spend a weekend with me? I froze. I didn't know what to say. I mean, this is the same person who didn't even want Emily when she was born, and now she's asking to play weekend mom? I told her I'd think about it, but inside I was screaming no. There was no way I was letting Sarah take Emily, especially when she hadn't proven anything to me. I needed advice, so I called up Rachel. She knew the whole situation and was pretty much the only person who saw through Sarah's act. When I told her about the weekend request, she was furious on my behalf. She doesn't get to just waltz back in and act like she's some kind of hero, Rachel said. And she was right. Sarah hadn't done any of the hard work. She didn't stay up all night when Emily was sick or struggling to pay for daycare. She didn't raise Emily. I did. But my parents? Yeah, they were thrilled at the idea of Emily spending the weekend with Sarah. It'll be so good for them to bond, my mom said, like that was the answer to everything. I swear it's like they just forgot the last 5 years ever happened. They didn't see the damage Sarah had done by leaving. All they saw was their golden child coming back, and they were ready to forgive and forget in an instant. The problem was, I wasn't ready to forget. And I sure as hell wasn't going to just hand Emily over to Sarah like she was owed something. I had to put my foot down, and I knew that wasn't going to go over well. When Sarah came over the next time, she brought up the weekend thing again. I looked her right in the eye and told her, I'm not comfortable with that. You've only just started coming around, and Emily doesn't even know you yet. Let's take this slow. She didn't take it well. At all. She got all defensive, saying things like, I'm her real mom. I have a right to spend time with her. That hit a nerve, and I snapped back. You gave up that right the day you walked away. The look on her face? Pure shock, like she couldn't believe I was standing up to her. She stormed out of the house, and I thought, well, that's the end of that. But no, it wasn't. Not even a week later, I started hearing from my parents about how upset Sarah was, how she just wanted to make things right, and how I was being too harsh. I couldn't believe it. My parents, who had barely lifted a finger to help me with Emily, were now coming to Sarah's defense. It was like I was the bad guy in my own story. They were acting like Sarah was the victim here, and it drove me insane. It was clear now that this wasn't going to be a simple, let's reconnect situation. Sarah wasn't just back for a visit. She wanted something more, and I wasn't about to let her take what was mine. But the worst part? This was just the beginning. So, after Sarah's little meltdown at my house, I thought maybe she'd back off for a while. Maybe she'd realize that I wasn't just going to hand Emily over to her and that she'd have to earn her place in her life. But nope, that wasn't what happened. In fact, it seemed like things got worse after that. And this time, it wasn't just Sarah I had to deal with. It was my whole family. It started with my mom. Of course it did. She's always had a soft spot for Sarah, and even after everything that happened, she still saw her as this innocent little girl who just made a few mistakes. A few mistakes? Sarah basically abandoned her child for 5 years, but somehow that never seemed to register with my mom. She called me a few days after the blow-up with Sarah and went on and on about how Sarah's really hurting right now. I had to stop myself from laughing. I mean, Sarah was hurting. What about me? I was the one who had been raising Emily all this time. I was the one who sacrificed everything to make sure Emily had a good life. But of course, none of that seemed to matter. Mom kept pushing, telling me how I should give Sarah another chance, and how family is the most important thing. I'd heard that line a million times before, and every time it was just an excuse for Sarah's behavior. Family is important, sure, but that doesn't mean you get to walk all over people and expect them to forgive you just because you share the same last name. But the worst part? It wasn't just my mom. Soon enough, I started hearing from other family members too. My aunt called, and the conversation went pretty much the same way. Sarah just wants to make things right, she said. You should let her be a part of Emily's life. And then my cousin chimed in with the same nonsense, telling me how Sarah had changed and how it would be good for Emily to know her biological mom. It felt like a full-blown intervention. Suddenly, people I hadn't spoken to in years were coming out of the woodwork to give me their opinions on my life. And of course, none of them actually knew the full story. They didn't know what it was like to be up all night with a newborn, or to miss out on everything in your 20s because you had to prioritize someone else's life over your own. They didn't know how hard it was to juggle school, work, and raising a baby all on your own. But sure, they had plenty to say about what I should do. At first, I tried to be patient. I tried to explain to them that this wasn't just about giving Sarah another chance. This was about protecting Emily. I wasn't going to let Sarah swoop in now that Emily was older and act like she was the hero. She wasn't the one who had done the hard work. I was. But none of that seemed to get through to anyone. The more they pushed, the more frustrated I got. It wasn't even about Sarah anymore. It was about the fact that my family couldn't see the truth. They were so blinded by this idea of family unity and forgiveness that they didn't care about what was right for Emily. All they cared about was making Sarah feel better. Then came the ultimatum from my parents. I was sitting at home trying to enjoy a quiet night with Emily when my dad called. Now, my dad usually stayed out of the drama between me and my mom, so I wasn't expecting what happened next. We need to talk, he said. His tone was serious, and right away, I knew this wasn't going to be a friendly chat. He started off by telling me how my mom was really upset about the whole situation with Sarah. No surprise there. But then he hit me with this. We've been thinking, and maybe it's time for you to consider letting Sarah have joint custody of Emily. I just sat there stunned. Joint custody? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own father was suggesting that I share custody of my daughter with the woman who abandoned her for 5 years. Dad, you can't be serious, I said. Sarah hasn't been there for Emily. I've raised her. She's my daughter. I know, he replied, like he was trying to calm me down. But she's still Emily's mother biologically, and she's trying to make things right now. It was like I was talking to a brick wall. No matter how much I explained that Sarah had given up her rights as a mother, they just didn't get it. In their minds, Sarah was still Emily's mom, and I was the one standing in the way of a reunion. The whole conversation left me feeling drained. It was like no matter what I did, I couldn't win. My parents were always going to side with Sarah, and it didn't matter how much I had done for Emily or how hard I had worked. To them, Sarah would always come first. After that call, I started to pull back from my family. I just couldn't handle the constant pressure anymore. Every time I talked to them, it felt like they were trying to guilt trip me into giving Sarah what she wanted. And I wasn't about to let them make me feel like I was the bad guy for protecting my daughter. Rachel, thank God, was my rock during all of this. She kept reminding me that I wasn't crazy, that I was doing the right thing by standing my ground. You're Emily's mom, not Sarah, she'd say. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. But as much as I tried to stay strong, the stress was getting to me. I started having nightmares about losing Emily, about Sarah coming in and taking her away. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, my heart racing, and it would take me a few minutes to calm down and remind myself that it wasn't real. But the fear was still there, lurking in the back of my mind. And the more my family pushed, the more I started to wonder if they were right. Was I being too harsh? Should I let Sarah have more of a role in Emily's life? I knew deep down that I wasn't wrong, but when your own family turns against you, it's hard not to question yourself. Every day felt like a battle, and I was getting tired of fighting. And then came the moment that pushed everything over the edge. My mom showed up at my house unannounced, with Sarah in tow. I wasn't prepared for it, and honestly, I think that was the point. They wanted to catch me off guard, to get me to agree to something I wasn't ready for. My mom started off with her usual lines about family and forgiveness, but I could tell there was something more going on. Then she hit me with it. We've talked to a lawyer, and Sarah's thinking about taking legal action to get custody of Emily. I felt like the ground dropped out from under me. Legal action? My own sister was going to try and take my daughter away from me? That's when I realized this wasn't just family drama anymore. This was about to become a full-blown fight, and I wasn't going to back down. So, after my mom dropped the whole "Sarah's thinking about legal action" bomb on me, things got real. Like, really real. I wasn't just dealing with family drama anymore. This was turning into an actual fight for Emily, and the thought of losing her scared the hell out of me. The first thing I did was call Greg, the lawyer I'd been working with. I wasn't about to take any chances. I needed to know exactly where I stood legally because I had no idea what kind of lies Sarah might try to throw at the court. Greg was calm, like always, which helped me feel a little less panicked. He reassured me that I had a strong case. Emily had been in my care since birth. I had legal custody, and Sarah had abandoned her for 5 years. Still, there was that nagging fear in the back of my mind. Courts can be unpredictable, and when it comes to family law, things can get messy fast. I knew I needed to prepare for the worst, so Greg and I went over everything. Every document, every piece of evidence. I had photos, medical records, school reports, anything that proved I was the one who raised Emily. Sarah had nothing. She might have been Emily's biological mother, but that was the extent of her involvement. And I wasn't about to let her waltz into court and act like she'd been some kind of victim. But even though I was getting everything lined up, the emotional toll was killing me. Every night I'd lie awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, just imagining what it would be like if Sarah somehow won. What if she convinced the judge that I was keeping Emily from her? What if the court actually gave her joint custody? I mean, this was my daughter, the little girl I'd raised from day one. The idea of losing her, even for a weekend, was unbearable. On top of that, my family wasn't letting up. My mom kept calling, trying to talk some sense into me. She actually said I should just agree to joint custody before things got ugly. Ugly? They were already ugly. And now she was acting like I was the one who was making it worse. My dad? He wasn't much help either. He'd just say things like, maybe this is what's best for everyone. Everyone except me and Emily, apparently. And then, as if things couldn't get worse, Sarah had the nerve to start showing up at Emily's school. The first time, she was just standing outside at pickup, watching from across the street. I don't know if she was trying to intimidate me or what, but it freaked me out. I didn't say anything to Emily about it because, honestly, she didn't even recognize Sarah. That's how much of a stranger Sarah was to her. But I knew this was Sarah's way of trying to get under my skin. I had to get the school involved. I told them not to let Sarah anywhere near Emily unless I was there, and thankfully, they were really understanding. But it felt like I was being watched all the time, like Sarah was just waiting for me to slip up. The court date finally came, and I was a nervous wreck. I walked into that courtroom and there she was, Sarah, with my parents sitting right behind her. I can't even explain how betrayed I felt seeing them there. They were supposed to be my parents. They were supposed to support me. But no, they were sitting there, backing Sarah up like she hadn't completely bailed on her daughter's life. The hearing itself was tense. Greg laid everything out, how I'd adopted Emily, how Sarah had abandoned her, how I'd been the one to provide for her in every way. He was calm, collected, and professional, while Sarah's lawyer tried to spin some story about how Sarah had turned her life around and how she just wanted to reconnect with her child. It was the same sob story she'd been feeding my family for months, but this time, it didn't fly. Then Sarah got up to testify. And man, was that something. She talked about how she was young and scared when she had Emily, and how she regretted not being there for her. She even started crying on the stand, trying to play the sympathy card. But I wasn't buying it, and neither was the judge. There was no way Sarah could explain away 5 years of complete absence, no matter how many tears she shed. When it was my turn to speak, I was shaking. Not because I was scared of Sarah, but because the weight of everything hit me all at once. I wasn't just defending my right to be Emily's mom, I was defending our entire life together. I told the court everything, how I'd been there for every milestone, every scraped knee, every late-night nightmare, how I'd done it all without any help from Sarah or my parents, and most importantly, how much Emily meant to me. By the end of it, I could barely hold it together, but I knew I had to stay strong, for Emily's sake. The judge took a while to deliberate, which felt like an eternity. I kept glancing over at Sarah, who looked nervous for the first time. My parents wouldn't even make eye contact with me. I think deep down, they knew Sarah didn't stand a chance. Finally, the judge made the ruling. Sarah's petition for joint custody was denied. Emily was staying with me, where she belonged. I can't even describe the wave of relief that hit me when those words came out of the judge's mouth. It was like I could finally breathe again. But even though I won the case, things weren't perfect. My relationship with my parents? It was shattered. I didn't even speak to them after the hearing. I just grabbed Emily and walked out of there. I didn't have anything to say to them anymore. If they wanted to side with Sarah, that was their choice. But I wasn't going to let them back into my life after what they did. As for Sarah, I haven't heard from her since the court ruling. I'm not naive enough to think she's gone for good, but for now, she's out of the picture. And that's all I care about. These days, things are starting to feel normal again. Emily and I are back in our routine, and we're happy. It's just the two of us, like it's always been, and I'm okay with that. Family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who are there for you, who support you no matter what. And if that means cutting off the toxic people, so be it. At the end of the day, I know I made the right choice. Emily is safe, and she's with the person who loves her more than anything in the world. That's all that matters.